Picture this, a dusty military training ground where the sound of boots on gravel mingles with harsh laughter. Male soldiers pointing fingers at a young woman in uniform, their voices carrying cruel jokes about how she'll never measure up. They see weakness where they should see determination. They see failure where they should see potential. But what they don't see is the fire burning in her eyes. A fire that will soon make them eat every single word. This is the story of Sergeant Maria Gonzalez, a woman who turned mockery into motivation, doubt into determination, and skepticism into one of the most incredible shots in military history. When the smoke cleared at 4,000 meters, it wasn't just a target that was hit. It was every stereotype, every barrier, and every person who said she couldn't do it. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting angry. Sometimes it's getting accurate. Maria Gonzalez grew up in a small town in Texas where Friday night football was religion, and the idea of a girl joining the military was about as foreign as snow in July. Her father worked at the local auto repair shop, coming home every evening with grease under his fingernails and stories about engines that wouldn't cooperate. Her mother managed the household budget with the precision of a mathematician, making sure every dollar stretched to cover groceries, utilities, and the occasional family movie night. The Gonzalez family wasn't wealthy, but they were rich in values. Hard work wasn't just encouraged, it was expected. When Maria turned 16 and wanted a car, her parents didn't hand her the keys to a shiny vehicle. Instead, her father pointed to a rusted old pickup truck in their driveway and said, "Fix it, and it's yours." For the next 6 months, Maria spent every afternoon after school learning about carburetors, brake systems, and transmission fluid. Her hands became permanently stained with motor oil, and her patience was tested daily by stubborn bolts and mysterious engine noises. But something magical happened during those months in the garage. Maria discovered she had an unusual gift, an almost supernatural ability to focus under pressure. While other teenagers got frustrated and gave up when things got difficult, Maria would narrow her eyes and attack problems with methodical precision. She could spend hours troubleshooting a single issue, never losing her temper, never rushing through steps. Her father began calling her Eagle Eye because she could spot problems that experienced mechanics missed. This talent extended beyond mechanical work. During hunting season, when Maria accompanied her uncle on deer hunting trips, she consistently outperformed seasoned hunters. While they struggled to hit targets at 200 yards, Maria was making clean shots at 400 yards with an old rifle that had seen better days. Her uncle would shake his head in amazement, telling anyone who would listen that his niece had the steadiest hands in 3 counties. High school brought new challenges and new doubts. Maria's guidance counselor, Mrs. Peterson, was a well-meaning woman who believed girls should pursue practical careers. During their required career counseling session, Mrs. Peterson spread brochures across her desk, nursing, teaching, administrative assistant positions. When Maria mentioned her interest in the military, Mrs. Peterson's smile became strained. "Honey, the military is a very difficult path for young women," Mrs. Peterson said, adjusting her glasses. "Have you considered something more suitable? You have excellent grades. You could become a nurse or maybe work in an office." Maria felt something cold settle in her stomach. She looked at the brochures, all featuring smiling women in predictable roles, and realized that everyone around her was trying to put her in a box. The same box that had been handed down for generations. The safe box. The expected box. "I appreciate your concern," Maria said, her voice steady despite the frustration building inside her. "But I think I'll stick with my original plan." "Mrs. Peterson frowned and made a note in Maria's file. That note would follow her through the rest of high school, a constant reminder that pursuing her dreams was considered a mistake by the adults who were supposed to guide her. The reactions from her classmates were even worse. When word spread that Maria was planning to enlist after graduation, the hallway whispers began. Some of her female classmates accused her of trying to be something she wasn't. The boys were more direct with their skepticism. During lunch one afternoon, Jake Morrison, the star quarterback who had never shown any interest in Maria before, suddenly appeared at her table. "So I heard you want to play soldier," Jake said, his voice loud enough to attract attention from nearby tables. "That's cute. You know they have weight requirements, right? And push-up standards? This isn't like playing army in your backyard when you were little." Maria looked up from her textbook, her expression calm. "I'm aware of the physical standards. I've been preparing for them." Jake laughed, and several of his friends joined in. "Preparing? What, like running around the block a few times?" "Maria, real military training would break you in half. Maybe you should stick to something more your speed. I heard the library is hiring. The cafeteria had grown quiet, with dozens of students watching the exchange. Maria felt heat rising in her cheeks, but she kept her voice level. I guess we'll find out, won't we? Yeah, we will, Jake said, his grin widening. And when you wash out in the first week, don't say nobody warned you. After Jake and his friends walked away, laughing and making jokes about G.I. Jane, Maria sat alone at her table, staring at her half-eaten sandwich. For a moment, doubt crept in. Maybe they were right. Maybe she was being naive. The military was known for being tough on everyone, but especially challenging for women, trying to prove themselves in a male-dominated environment. Then she remembered the feeling of satisfaction when that old pickup truck finally roared to life after months of work. She thought about the deer she'd cleanly taken down at distances that impressed experienced hunters. She recalled all the times she'd been underestimated and had proven people wrong. The doubt faded, replaced by something much stronger, determination. That evening, Maria found her father in the garage, working on a neighbor's car. The familiar sounds of clinking tools and quiet concentration filled the space. She picked up a wrench and began helping him, working in comfortable silence for several minutes before speaking. "Dad, do you think I'm making a mistake?" she asked, not looking up from the bolt she was tightening. Her father paused in his work and considered the question seriously. He'd always been a man of few words, but when he spoke, people listened. "Maria, I've watched you fix engines that stumped mechanics with 20 years of experience. I've seen you outshoot grown men who've been hunting since they were boys. Most importantly, I've watched you stick with difficult projects when everyone else gave up." He set down his tools and looked at her directly. The only mistake would be letting other people's fears become your limitations. His words hit her like a revelation. That's exactly what was happening. Other people's fears were trying to become her limitations. Mrs. Peterson's fear that Maria would struggle in a man's world. Jake's fear that someone he considered beneath him might accomplish something he couldn't. Even some of her friends' fears that she was abandoning the safe path they all planned to follow. 2 months later, Maria walked into the military recruitment office with a determination that surprised even the seasoned recruiter, Sergeant Williams. He was a man who had seen countless young people come through his door with dreams of military service, and he had developed a sixth sense for who would succeed and who would wash out before completing basic training. "So, you want to be a soldier?" Sergeant Williams said, leaning back in his chair and studying Maria's face. "What makes you think you've got what it takes?" Maria had prepared for this question, but instead of giving him the rehearsed answer she'd practiced, she found herself speaking from the heart. "I don't know if I have what it takes," she said honestly, "but I know I'm willing to find out. I know I don't quit when things get difficult, and I know I'm tired of people telling me what I can't do." Sergeant Williams smiled, not the polite professional smile he gave most recruits, but a genuine expression of respect. "That's the best answer I've heard in months. Most people come in here talking about how tough they are or how much they want to serve their country. You're the first person who's been honest enough to admit you don't know everything." The paperwork took 2 hours. Medical examinations, aptitude tests, background checks, and countless forms that needed signatures. When it was finished, Maria held her enlistment papers in hands that trembled slightly, not from fear, but from excitement. She was really doing this, despite every person who had tried to discourage her, despite every doubt that had whispered in her ear during quiet moments. She had taken the first step toward proving them all wrong. The months between enlistment and basic training passed in a blur of preparation. Maria threw herself into physical conditioning with the same methodical approach she'd used to rebuild that pickup truck. She ran every morning before school, did push-ups and sit-ups during lunch break, and spent evenings at the local gym working with weights. Her body began to change, becoming stronger and more defined. More importantly, her confidence grew with every milestone she reached. But the real test was still ahead. Basic training would be where her commitment would be truly measured, where she would face challenges designed to break down recruits and rebuild them as soldiers. She knew there would be drill sergeants who might doubt her abilities, fellow recruits who might resent her presence, and moments when she would question her own decision. The night before leaving for basic training, Maria stood in her childhood bedroom, packing the few personal items she was allowed to bring. Her father appeared in the doorway, holding something wrapped in an old cloth. "This belonged to your grandfather," he said, unwrapping a small compass with a cracked face and tarnished brass casing. "He carried it through World War II. It brought him home safely, and I thought, well, maybe it could do the same for you." Maria took the compass with reverent hands, feeling the weight of family history and expectation. Her grandfather had died when she was young, but she remembered his stories about fighting in Europe, about the courage it took to face uncertainty every day. Now she was following in his footsteps, blazing a trail he never could have imagined. "I won't let you down," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was speaking to her father, her grandfather's memory, or herself. Her father hugged her tight, and for a moment, she was just a scared teenager leaving home for the first time. Then she straightened her shoulders, picked up her bag, and walked toward a future that would demand everything she had to give. The bus ride to basic training was long and filled with young people who were all trying to hide their nervousness behind false bravado. Maria sat quietly, watching the landscape change outside her window, mentally preparing herself for what lay ahead. She thought about Jake Morrison and his cruel laughter. She thought about Mrs. Peterson's doubtful expression. She thought about all the people who had tried to convince her to choose an easier path. Soon she would begin to prove them wrong. But first, she would have to survive the crucible that would either forge her into the soldier she wanted to become or break her completely. Either way, she was ready to find out who she really was when everything was on the line. The bus pulled into Fort Benning at 4:30 in the morning, and Maria's new life began with a drill sergeant's voice that could have awakened the dead. Sergeant First Class Thompson was a mountain of a man whose presence filled the entire bus before he even spoke. When he did speak, his words cut through the pre-dawn darkness like a blade. "Welcome to your worst nightmare, recruits," Thompson bellowed, his voice echoing off the metal walls of the bus. "You have exactly 30 seconds to get off my bus. Grab your gear and form up outside. Move, move, move." The next few hours passed in a chaotic blur of shouting, confusion, and controlled panic. Maria found herself standing in formation with 43 other recruits, all trying to look invisible, while drill sergeants circled them like predators. She noticed immediately that she was one of only 6 women in her training company, a ratio that would become both a source of strength and a constant reminder of how closely she would be watched. Staff Sergeant Martinez was assigned as her primary drill instructor, a woman whose reputation for toughness was legendary throughout the training base. Martinez had served 3 combat deployments and had earned her position through a combination of exceptional performance and an unwillingness to accept anything less than perfection from herself or her soldiers. She approached Maria during the first equipment inspection with an expression that revealed nothing. "Gonzalez," Martinez said, reading from her clipboard. "Texas girl, you think you're tough because you grew up in the country?" "No, drill sergeant," Maria replied, keeping her eyes focused straight ahead. "Good answer, because tough is what we make here, not what you bring with you. I don't care if you can ride horses or shoot beer cans off fence posts. This is the real world, and in the real world, your weakness gets people killed." Martinez stepped closer, lowering her voice so only Maria could hear. "I'm going to push you harder than anyone else in this company. Not because I don't like you, but because I know what you're going to face out there. Some of these male soldiers are going to doubt you every day of your career. My job is to make sure you're so damn good that their doubt doesn't matter." The first week of basic training was designed to strip away civilian habits and rebuild recruits from the ground up. Maria had prepared herself physically, but nothing could have prepared her for the mental exhaustion of having every action criticized, every movement corrected, every assumption challenged. She learned to make her bunk with military precision, to clean her rifle until it gleamed, and to respond to orders without hesitation. But it was during weapons training that Maria began to distinguish herself. The M16 rifle felt natural in her hands from the first moment she picked it up. While other recruits struggled with marksmanship fundamentals, Maria was consistently hitting targets that made the range instructors do double takes. Sergeant Rodriguez, who had been teaching marksmanship for 8 years, pulled her aside after the second week of shooting. "Gonzalez, where did you learn to shoot like that?" he asked, reviewing her scorecard with obvious admiration. "My uncle taught me to hunt when I was young, Sergeant," Maria replied. "Hunting and military marksmanship are 2 different animals, soldier. What you're doing out there, that's special. I want you to consider trying out for the base shooting team." The suggestion was flattering, but Maria knew it would also paint a target on her back. Excellence always attracted attention, and not all of that attention would be positive. She was right to be concerned. That evening, as she was cleaning her rifle in the barracks, several male recruits gathered around her bunk. "So, Annie Oakley," said Private Henderson, a stocky young man from Ohio who had struggled with every aspect of basic training. "I hear you think you're some kind of sharpshooter." Maria continued cleaning her weapon without looking up. "I just try to do my best with whatever task I'm given." "That's a fancy way of saying you think you're better than the rest of us," Henderson continued. his voice growing louder and attracting attention from other recruits. "Maybe somebody should take you down a peg or two." Private Jackson, who had been watching the exchange from his own bunk, stood up and walked over. Jackson was from rural Alabama and had grown up around hunting and firearms. He was also one of the few recruits who had shown genuine respect for everyone in their unit, regardless of gender. "Henderson, maybe you should focus on improving your own shooting instead of worrying about hers," Jackson said calmly. "Last time I checked, she wasn't the one who missed the entire target backing from 50 yards. Henderson's face flushed red. "Nobody asked you, Jackson. And nobody asked you to harass Gonzalez while she's trying to maintain her weapon," Jackson replied. "How about we all just focus on getting through this training instead of creating problems where there don't need to be any?" The confrontation ended without violence, but Maria realized that she was walking a tightrope. Perform too well, and she would be accused of showing off. Perform poorly, and she would be seen as proof that women didn't belong in the military. She needed to find a balance between excellence and humility that would earn respect without generating resentment. The solution came during the 4th week of training, when their company was introduced to advanced marksmanship techniques. This was where recruits learned to shoot at longer distances, under various weather conditions, and with different types of equipment. It was also where many recruits discovered that basic shooting skills didn't automatically translate to advanced marksmanship. The course was taught by Master Sergeant Collins, a career soldier whose reputation as a marksman was legendary. Collins had served as a sniper in multiple deployments and had been responsible for training some of the military's most elite shooters. He was also known for his complete indifference to anything other than results. "Marksmanship is not about strength or size or gender," Collins announced to the gathered recruits on the first day of advanced training. "It's about discipline, patience, and the ability to perform under pressure. Some of you think you're good shots because you can hit a paper target at 100 yards in perfect weather conditions. Real marksmanship means hitting what you need to hit when everything is going wrong around you." The first exercise involved shooting at targets placed at 500 yards while wearing full combat gear. Recruits had to run 200 yards, drop into position, and engage targets while their hearts were racing and their breathing was labored. It was designed to simulate combat conditions where perfect shooting stances and controlled breathing might not be possible. Maria found herself in the 3rd group to attempt the exercise. She watched as the first 2 groups struggled with the distance and the physical stress of the approach run. Several recruits missed the target entirely. Others hit the target but scored poorly due to shots scattered across the outer rings. When her turn came, Maria forced herself to slow down mentally even as her body was racing. She used techniques her uncle had taught her for hunting in challenging conditions, controlling her breathing, finding her natural point of aim, and following through on every shot. When the smoke cleared, she had scored in the expert range, with all 10 shots grouped within the center rings of the target. The range fell silent as Master Sergeant Collins examined her target through binoculars. After what felt like an eternity, he announced the results. Recruit Gonzalez, expert qualification, outstanding shooting under stress conditions. The reaction from her fellow recruits was mixed. Some offered genuine congratulations, recognizing excellent performance when they saw it. Others remained silent, their expressions revealing a mixture of surprise and resentment. But Maria noticed something important. Even the recruits who seemed to resent her success couldn't argue with the results. Numbers didn't lie, and targets didn't care about gender. Over the following weeks, Maria's reputation as a marksman grew. She consistently outperformed most of her male counterparts during shooting exercises, but she also began volunteering to help struggling recruits improve their own skills. This approach helped her navigate the social dynamics of basic training more effectively. Instead of being seen as someone who was showing off, she became known as someone who was willing to share her expertise. Private Carter, who had been struggling with marksmanship since the beginning of training, approached her one evening after another frustrating day at the range. "Gonzalez, I hate to ask this, but could you maybe give me some pointers?" Carter said, his pride clearly wounded by having to ask for help. "I'm in danger of washing out if I don't improve my shooting, and I can't go home a failure."
Maria spent the next hour working with Carter on breathing techniques, sight alignment, and trigger control.
She explained concepts in simple terms and helped him identify the specific mistakes that were causing his poor performance. By the end of their session, Carter was shooting more consistently than he had since arriving at basic training. Word of Maria's willingness to help spread through the barracks, and soon she was informally tutoring several recruits who were struggling with various aspects of their training. This generosity of spirit helped her earn genuine respect from classmates who might otherwise have remained skeptical of her abilities. But the real test of her character came during the 7th week of training. when their company participated in a field training exercise designed to simulate combat conditions. The exercise lasted 72 hours and required recruits to navigate challenging terrain, complete mission objectives, and defend their position against mock enemy attacks. Maria was assigned to a squad led by Private First Class Williams, a natural leader who had quickly earned the respect of both drill sergeants and fellow recruits. The squad's mission was to establish an observation post on a ridgeline overlooking a valley, gather intelligence on enemy movement, and call in artillery strikes on designated targets. The mission began before dawn on a cold, rainy morning that made every task more difficult. The squad had to hike 5 miles through mud and underbrush, while carrying full combat loads that weighed over 60 pounds. Several recruits began struggling with the pace within the first hour, but Maria found that her months of preparation had paid off. She was able to maintain the required speed while helping carry equipment for squad members who were having difficulties. When they reached their objective, the squad had to establish a defensive perimeter and set up observation equipment. This was where Maria's mechanical aptitude proved as valuable as her marksmanship skills. When the squad's radio equipment malfunctioned, she was able to diagnose and repair the problem, while other squad members provided security. Her steady hands and methodical approach to troubleshooting saved the mission from potential failure. The real challenge came on the second day, when the squad was required to engage mock enemy targets at extreme range. The scenario called for them to identify and neutralize sniper positions located over 800 yards away, a distance that pushed the limits of standard infantry weapons and skills. Using the squad's designated marksman rifle, Maria was able to successfully engage targets that other squad members couldn't even see clearly through their scopes. Her ability to read wind conditions, estimate range, and compensate for various environmental factors impressed not only her squad mates but also the exercise observers who were evaluating their performance. Staff Sergeant Martinez, who had been watching the exercise from the valley below, later told Maria that her shooting during the field exercise was some of the best she had ever seen from a basic training recruit. "You have a natural gift, Gonzalez," Martinez said, as they walked back to the main base after the exercise concluded. "But more importantly, you have the discipline and work ethic to develop that gift into something exceptional. I think you should seriously consider specialized training after you complete basic." The suggestion planted a seed in Maria's mind that would grow into a defining ambition. She began researching opportunities for advanced marksmanship training and specialized military roles that would allow her to fully utilize her developing skills. She learned about sniper schools, special operations units, and competitive shooting teams that represented the military in national and international competitions. But she also knew that achieving those goals would require more than just shooting ability. She would need to excel in every aspect of her military training, earn the respect of her superiors and peers, and prove that her early success wasn't just beginner's luck. The stakes were getting higher, and the challenges were about to become much more demanding. The final weeks of basic training passed quickly, filled with comprehensive testing that evaluated everything the recruits had learned over the previous 3 months. Maria performed exceptionally well in all areas, but it was during the final marksmanship examination that she truly distinguished herself. The test required recruits to engage targets at multiple distances under various conditions, including low light, adverse weather, and time pressure. It was designed to separate competent soldiers from exceptional marksmen, and the standards were demanding enough that many experienced soldiers struggled to achieve passing scores. When Maria's turn came, she approached the firing line with the same calm focus that had become her trademark. She engaged targets at 200, 300, and 500 yards with consistent accuracy that drew attention from instructors throughout the range. But it was her performance on the final stage of the test that created a moment that would be talked about for years afterward. The final challenge required engaging a small target at 600 yards in windy conditions, with a time limit that barely allowed for proper sight adjustment. Most recruits were satisfied if they hit the target at all under these conditions. Maria not only hit the target, but placed her shot within the innermost scoring ring, achieving a perfect score on what instructors considered the most difficult shot in the basic training curriculum. Master Sergeant Collins approached her after the test with an expression of genuine amazement. "Recruit Gonzalez, in 15 years of teaching this course, I have never seen a basic training student achieve that level of precision under those conditions. You have a gift that could take you as far as you want to go in this army." Graduation day arrived with a ceremony attended by family members and military dignitaries. Maria stood in formation wearing the dress blue uniform she had earned through 3 months of intensive training. Her parents sat in the audience, their pride evident despite their efforts to maintain military bearing appropriate to the occasion. When her name was called as the honor graduate for marksmanship, Maria felt a surge of satisfaction that went beyond personal achievement. She had proven to herself and others that excellence was possible through dedication and hard work. But more importantly, she had begun to understand that her real journey was just beginning. After the ceremony, as families gathered to celebrate with their newly graduated soldiers, Sergeant First Class Thompson approached Maria's parents. "And Mrs. Gonzalez, you should be very proud of your daughter," Thompson said. "She's not just an excellent soldier, she's the kind of person who makes everyone around her better. That's the mark of true leadership." Maria overheard the conversation and felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the ceremonial uniform or the bright sunshine of graduation day. She had not only survived basic training, but had thrived in ways that exceeded her own expectations. The girl who had been mocked in high school for her military ambitions was now being recognized as one of the top performers in her training class. But even as she celebrated this milestone, Maria knew that her real test was still ahead. Basic training had given her fundamental skills and confidence, but it was in her next assignment that she would face the true measure of her abilities and determination. The military was about to place new challenges in front of her that would demand everything she had learned and more than she knew she possessed. 6 months after graduating from basic training, Sergeant Maria Gonzalez found herself at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, assigned to the 101st Airborne Division as a designated marksman. The transition from training environment to operational unit had been both challenging and rewarding, presenting her with opportunities to apply her skills in realistic scenarios while working alongside experienced soldiers who had served multiple deployments. Her platoon sergeant, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, was a veteran of 3 combat tours who had initially been skeptical about having a female soldier in a specialized role. However, Maria's consistent performance during training exercises and her professional attitude had gradually earned his respect and trust. Rodriguez had become something of a mentor, pushing her to develop not just her shooting skills, but her overall tactical knowledge and leadership abilities. "Gonzalez, you've got natural talent, but talent without tactical understanding is just a parlor trick," Rodriguez had told her during one of their training sessions. "In real operations, you need to read the battlefield, understand mission objectives, and make smart decisions under pressure. Shooting straight is just one piece of a much bigger puzzle." Maria had taken this guidance to heart, volunteering for additional training opportunities and studying military tactics during her off-duty hours. She attended every optional course offered on base, from advanced fieldcraft to leadership development. Her dedication didn't go unnoticed by her superiors, who began considering her for increasingly challenging assignments. The opportunity that would define her career came during the annual division competition, a week-long event designed to test units against each other in various military skills. The competition included everything from physical fitness challenges to complex tactical scenarios, with individual and team events that showcased the division's best soldiers. The marksmanship competition was traditionally dominated by soldiers from the division's scout units, elite reconnaissance teams whose members were selected specifically for their shooting abilities and tactical skills. These were men who had proven themselves in combat and had spent years honing their craft under the guidance of some of the military's best instructors. When Maria's company commander, Captain Williams, submitted her name for the competition, several eyebrows were raised throughout the division. It wasn't that female soldiers were prohibited from competing, officially. The competition was open to all qualified personnel, but tradition and unspoken expectations had created an environment where certain events were considered the exclusive domain of male soldiers. The marksmanship competition consisted of multiple stages designed to test different aspects of shooting skill. Competitors would engage targets at various distances, under different weather conditions, and while wearing full combat equipment. The event culminated with a long-range precision shooting challenge that required competitors to hit targets at distances exceeding 1,000 yards, a test that separated good marksmen from exceptional ones. Maria spent weeks preparing for the competition, working with her platoon's weapon squad to develop techniques for extreme-range shooting. She studied weather patterns, practiced range estimation, and familiarized herself with every aspect of the specialized rifle system she would use in competition. Her preparation was methodical and exhaustive, leaving nothing to chance. The competition began on a Monday morning with perfect weather conditions that leveled the playing field for all competitors. Maria found herself among 32 of the division's best marksmen, including several soldiers whose reputations as shooters were legendary throughout the army. She was the only female competitor, a fact that drew attention and commentary from spectators and participants alike. Staff Sergeant Morrison, a sniper instructor from the division's Special Operations Unit, approached her during the equipment inspection that preceded the first day of competition. "I heard you're supposed to be some kind of hotshot shooter," Morrison said, his tone carrying a mixture of skepticism and casual dismissal. "Competition shooting is different from range training, soldier. There's pressure here that you might not be ready for. Maria checked the scope mounting on her rifle and replied without looking up. I guess we'll find out soon enough, Sergeant. Morrison laughed and shook his head. Yeah, we will. Try not to embarrass your unit too badly when you wash out. The first 3 days of competition included precision shooting at distances from 300 to 800 yards under various conditions. Maria performed consistently well, placing in the top 5 for each event and demonstrating the kind of steady nerves that impressed even skeptical observers. By Wednesday evening, she had climbed to 3rd place in the overall standings, trailing only 2 soldiers whose reputations as marksmen were known throughout the Army. Sergeant First Class Davis, a veteran sniper who held the current division record for long-range accuracy, was leading the competition with nearly perfect scores across all events. Following closely behind was Staff Sergeant Chen, whose performance in combat zones had earned him recognition as one of the military's premier marksmen. Both men had years of experience and specialized training that Maria lacked, making her position among the leaders even more impressive. The attention her performance was generating created its own pressure. Word had spread throughout the division that a female soldier was competing at the highest levels against the Army's elite marksmen. Soldiers who had never heard of Maria Gonzalez were suddenly following the competition results and debating whether her success was sustainable under the increased pressure of the final events. Captain Williams visited Maria on Wednesday evening to check on her mental state and offer encouragement. "How are you holding up, Gonzalez?" he asked, as they walked around the base perimeter during her evening fitness routine. "I know this level of attention can be overwhelming. I'm focusing on my shooting, sir," Maria replied. "Everything else is just noise." "Good attitude, but I want you to understand something. Regardless of how this competition ends, you've already proven that you belong here. Nobody can take that away from you." His words were meant to be encouraging, but they also highlighted the unique pressure Maria was facing. For her male competitors, this was simply a chance to demonstrate their skills and compete for recognition. For Maria, it had become a referendum on whether women could perform at the same level as men in traditionally male-dominated military specialties. Thursday brought the semi-final round, which would eliminate half of the remaining competitors and determine who would advance to Friday's championship event. The challenge involved engaging multiple targets at distances ranging from 600 to 1,200 yards under simulated combat conditions. Competitors had to move between firing positions while carrying full equipment loads and engage targets within strict time limits. The course was designed to test not just shooting accuracy but physical fitness, tactical movement, and the ability to perform under severe time pressure. Many of the division's best marksmen had been eliminated from previous competitions during this stage, unable to maintain their shooting standards while meeting the physical and temporal demands of the course. Maria approached the course with the same methodical mindset she had applied to every challenge in her military career. She had memorized the course layout, practiced movement techniques, and developed a shooting rhythm that would allow her to engage targets efficiently without sacrificing accuracy. Most importantly, she had learned to control her breathing and heart rate even during intense physical exertion. When her turn came, Maria moved through the course with fluid precision that impressed the range safety officers monitoring her progress. She engaged targets at long range with the same calm focus she had displayed during basic training, adjusting for wind and distance with calculations that had become second nature through months of practice. Her performance was flawless. Every target was hit within the scoring rings, and she completed the course with time to spare. When the scores were announced, she had posted the best performance of the day, moving into first place overall and guaranteeing her spot in Friday's championship round. The reaction was immediate and intense. Soldiers throughout the division buzzed with conversation about the female marksman who was outperforming the Army's elite shooters. Some expressed genuine admiration for her skill and composure under pressure. Others questioned whether there might be some explanation for her success other than superior ability. Staff Sergeant Morrison, who had dismissed her chances at the beginning of the week, approached her after the scores were posted. "I don't know how you're doing this, Gonzalez, but it's impressive," he said, his earlier skepticism replaced by grudging respect. "Most soldiers would be crushed by this kind of pressure. You seem to thrive on it." "Pressure is just another environmental factor to account for," Maria replied, "like wind or lighting conditions. Once you understand how it affects you, you can compensate for it." Morrison nodded slowly, beginning to understand that Maria's success wasn't luck or beginner's fortune. She had developed a systematic approach to marksmanship that allowed her to perform consistently regardless of external circumstances. It was the mark of a truly elite shooter. Friday morning arrived grey and windy, with weather conditions that would challenge even the most experienced marksmen. The championship round would consist of a single event that had become legendary within the division, engaging targets at distances exceeding 4,000 meters using the military's most advanced long-range rifle systems. This was shooting at the very edge of what was possible with standard military equipment. Success required not just exceptional marksmanship skills, but an understanding of ballistics, meteorology, and physics that few soldiers possessed. The targets were small enough that spotting them through a rifle scope required perfect optical conditions and unwavering concentration. Only 8 competitors had qualified for the championship round. Besides Maria, the field included some of the Army's most decorated marksmen, soldiers whose shooting achievements had earned them recognition at national and international levels. The pressure was intense, with hundreds of spectators gathering to witness what many considered the division's premier shooting event. The competition format was simple, but brutally demanding. Each competitor would have 3 shots to hit a target placed at 4,000 meters. Scoring would be based on accuracy, with additional points awarded for consistency across multiple shots. Weather conditions would be monitored and announced, but competitors would be responsible for making their own adjustments for wind, humidity, and other environmental factors. Maria was scheduled to shoot 5th, which meant she would have the advantage of observing other competitors' performances while dealing with the disadvantage of increasing wind speeds as the morning progressed. She used the waiting time to study weather patterns and make detailed calculations about the ballistic path her bullets would need to follow to reach the distant target. The first competitor, Sergeant Davis, was a methodical shooter whose technique had been refined through years of combat experience. His first shot missed the target entirely, a victim of wind conditions that was stronger than his calculations had anticipated. His second shot struck the target but in the outer scoring ring. His third shot was closer to center but still short of the precision needed for championship-level performance. The second and third competitors faced similar challenges, with wind conditions that seemed to shift randomly and made accurate shooting nearly impossible. By the time the fourth competitor finished, no one had achieved what would traditionally be considered a winning score. The weather was simply too challenging for consistent precision at such extreme range. When Maria's turn came, she approached the firing position with the same calm demeanor she had maintained throughout the week. She adjusted her rifle and scope settings based on the most recent weather readings, and took several minutes to study the target through her optics, noting subtle environmental cues that might affect her shots. Her first shot was a miss, off target to the right due to a wind gust that occurred just as she squeezed the trigger. Instead of becoming frustrated or making hasty adjustments, Maria took additional time to study the wind patterns and refine her calculations. She had learned through years of hunting that patience was often the difference between success and failure in challenging shooting conditions. Her second shot struck the target near the center scoring ring, eliciting gasps from spectators who had watched previous competitors struggle with much less accuracy. But Maria knew that one good shot was meaningless without consistency. Championship-level shooting required the ability to duplicate performance under pressure. For her third shot, Maria employed every technique she had learned throughout her military career. She controlled her breathing with meditation techniques learned during stress management training. She applied the mechanical precision her father had taught her while working on engines. Most importantly, she trusted the systematic approach to marksmanship that had carried her through every challenge she had faced. The shot felt perfect from the moment she squeezed the trigger. The rifle recoiled smoothly, and Maria knew instantly that she had executed the shot exactly as planned. Through her scope, she watched the bullet's impact kick up dust directly in the center of the target, a shot that would be measured as the most accurate of the entire competition. The range fell silent for several seconds before erupting in cheers and applause. Maria had not only hit the target with unprecedented accuracy, but had done so under weather conditions that had challenged the division's most experienced marksmen. The shot was later measured as a direct center hit at 4,127 meters, the longest confirmed accurate shot in division competition history. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, who had been watching from the spectator area, jogged to the firing position with tears in his eyes. "Maria, that was the most incredible shot I've ever seen,"
he said, his voice thick with emotion.
"You just made history." As news of her achievements spread throughout the base, Maria found herself surrounded by soldiers who wanted to congratulate her and understand how she had accomplished something that veteran marksmen considered nearly impossible. The same soldiers who had questioned her presence in the competition were now asking for her autograph and seeking advice about improving their own shooting. But the moment that mattered most came when Staff Sergeant Morrison approached her after the awards ceremony. The man who had dismissed her chances at the beginning of the week stood in front of her with a look of profound respect. Gonzalez, I owe you an apology, Morrison said. I was wrong about you, and I was wrong about what women can accomplish in this army. You didn't just outshoot us, you showed us what true professionalism looks like under pressure. The victory was more than just a shooting competition win. It was validation of every choice Maria had made since deciding to join the military, despite widespread skepticism about her chances of success. It proved that excellence was possible for anyone willing to work hard enough to achieve it, regardless of gender or background. Years later, when Maria had risen to the rank of Master Sergeant and was training new marksmen herself, she would often tell the story of that 4,000-meter shot to young soldiers who faced their own doubts and challenges. But she always emphasized that the shot itself was less important than the journey that made it possible. The thousands of hours of practice, the willingness to learn from failures, and the refusal to let other people's limitations become your own. The girl who had been laughed at in high school for wanting to be a soldier had become one of the Army's most respected marksmen. The shot heard around Fort Campbell that windy Friday morning was more than just an incredible display of shooting skill. It was proof that determination and hard work could overcome any obstacle, silence any critic, and achieve any dream.